She was mopping the floor of room 14 at the Palms Budget Inn on South Boulevard when the black car pulled into the parking lot at 6:52 on a Tuesday morning. She noticed it the way she noticed everything from that window, not because she was watching, but because 21 years of cleaning other people's rooms had trained her body to register anything that did not belong to the ordinary texture of a morning. The car was a Mercedes S-Class, the color of deep water, and it had no dealership badge on the trunk and no scratches anywhere on its body, and it sat in the parking lot of the Palms Budget Inn the way a cathedral might sit in the middle of a bus depot, present, correct, entirely wrong for the location. The driver did not get out immediately. He sat behind the wheel for 3 minutes, which she counted because the clock on the wall of room 14 had a second hand that swept rather than ticked, and she had learned to count by it. Then, he got out. He was a young man, 30s, in a dark suit, and he walked to the front office with the deliberate speed of someone who had been told exactly where to go and had no interest in the surroundings. She went back to her mop. She had 17 more rooms before her shift ended at noon. She did not know that the driver was looking for her. She did not know that he had driven 41 minutes from the Kenilworth neighborhood on the North Shore of Chicago to find her specifically, by name, in this specific parking lot on South Boulevard. She did not know that the man who had sent him was lying in a hospital bed in a private suite at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, with a diagnosis that had been delivered to his family 11 days ago, and that had produced, among its other effects, a list, handwritten, 3 pages long, of people this man needed to see before the thing that was coming arrived. Her name was first on the list. She had never met him. Her name was Abena Owusu. She was 53 years old, 127 pounds, and she had been working at the Palms Budget Inn for 9 years, and at the Comfort Suites on Wabash before that for 7, and at a hotel in Gary, Indiana before that for 5, which meant she had been cleaning rooms for 21 years, and had in that time developed an understanding of human beings that most people spend a lifetime trying to acquire through other means. She knew what a room said about the person who had slept in it. She knew the difference between mess that came from carelessness and mess that came from grief. She knew which guests had been crying and which had been drinking, and which had spent the entire night sitting in the chair by the window without touching the bed. She knew all of this without anyone telling her, the way a doctor knows a patient's history from the quality of their breathing before a word is spoken. She was the daughter of Kofi Owusu, who had come from Kumasi to Chicago in 1971 and had worked 33 years at the International Harvester plant in Melrose Park, and who had smelled, every evening of her childhood, of machine oil and Sunlight soap. Her mother, Nana, had sold fabric from a market stall at the Maxwell Street Market on Sunday mornings, and had kept the household accounts in a brown envelope tucked behind the radio in the kitchen. Abena had been raised between these two economies, the formal one her father disappeared into every morning, and the informal one her mother managed with the precision of someone who could calculate change in 3 currencies in her head while conducting 2 other conversations simultaneously. She had not gone to college, not because she could not. She had been the kind of student her teachers mentioned when other parents asked what was possible, but because in the year she would have gone, her father had had his first cardiac event, and the household had needed reorganizing, and she had been the one who knew how to reorganize it. She had taken the job at the hotel in Gary because it had a night shift, which meant she could sit with her father during the day and be at work in the hours when he was sleeping. He had lived another 6 years after that first event. She had been at his bedside for all 6 of them, including the final Tuesday in February 2009, when he had gone quietly between one breath and the next, which was the way Abena had always hoped things would end for people she loved. Quickly and without ceremony and with someone present who knew how to hold a hand. After her father died, she had moved from Gary to Chicago. She had found the room she still lived in, on the third floor of a building on West 51st Street, $640 a month, with a window that faced a wall and a radiator that made a sound like an argument between two people who would never resolve anything. She had hung a photograph of her parents on the wall above her table and a small carved wooden bird on the windowsill that her father had brought from Kumasi in 1971 and that had survived every move she had ever made, including 2 in the same year, which was a record she hoped not to break. She did not own much. What she owned, she kept in order. Her work uniforms were pressed every Sunday evening. Her shoes were clean. Her single good coat was a dark navy wool that she had bought from a resale shop on 47th Street for $18 and which she had worn for 11 winters because it was, structurally speaking, a very good coat. She did not owe money to anyone. She did not have a credit card. She had a savings account at a credit union on 63rd Street that contained $4,340, which she added to in amounts between $40 and $80 depending on the month, and which she thought of not as savings, but as ballast, the weight that keeps a ship from tipping when the weather changes. She had no children. She had been engaged once, in 1998, to a man named Emmanuel, who had been kind and had meant well, and who had taken a job in Atlanta in 1999 and had called for several months afterward, and then called less, and then not at all. And she had accepted this the way she accepted most things, by understanding it, filing it, and continuing in the direction she had already been going. She was not bitter about it. She was not much of anything about it. It was a thing that had happened, and then stopped happening, and the space it left had filled in with other things, as spaces do. The driver found her at 7:14 a.m. He knocked on the open door of room 14 and said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for Abena Owusu." She turned from the window. "I'm Abena," she said. He was holding an envelope, cream-colored, thick stock, the kind of envelope that announces itself. "My name is James Kolade," he said. "I work for a man named Chief Al Danjuma. He has asked me to bring this to you personally." She looked at the envelope. She looked at the car in the parking lot. "I don't know anyone by that name," she said. "He knows that," James said. "It's explained in the letter. He would like to meet with you today, if that's possible. At Northwestern Memorial. He's not well." She took the envelope. She did not open it immediately. She held it at her side and looked at James Kolade with the unhurried attention she gave to everything. "How did he find me?" she said. "That's also in the letter," James said. She finished her shift. She mopped the remaining floors of rooms 15 through 22 and changed the linen on 7 beds and restocked 4 bathroom caddies and signed out at 12:04 p.m. Then she sat in the break room with a cup of tea and opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten, in the careful script of a man who had once written with great precision and was now writing with hands that had recently learned to tremble. The ink was dark blue. The handwriting was uneven in places but legible throughout, the way a voice is uneven when it is saying something it has been saving for a long time. She read it once. Then she sat with it in her lap and looked at the wall of the break room, which had a motivational poster on it that she had never read in 9 years of working here. Then she read the letter again. She put it back in the envelope. She put on her navy coat. She walked to the bus stop on South Boulevard and took the 29 to Michigan Avenue. If what just happened in that break room is pulling at you the way I think it is, subscribe now. Because what Abina reads in that letter is the part of this story that this entire morning has been moving toward. Northwestern Memorial Hospital sat on East Erie Street with the composure of a building that understood it was where important things happened. Abina arrived at 2:37 p.m. and gave her name at the front desk and was met within 4 minutes by a woman named Pauline Adeyemi, who introduced herself as the family's personal coordinator and who led Abina through corridors that became progressively quieter and better lit until they reached the private wing on the 8th floor, where the air smelled of fresh flowers and the carpet was thick enough to absorb sound completely. Outside room 814, Pauline stopped. "He tires quickly," she said. "He wanted me to tell you there's no obligation. You can leave at any time." "I know," Abena said. She went in. Chief Al Danjuma was 81 years old, and he was in the bed the way very ill people are in beds, not resting, but held. He was a large man who had become a thin one, the way large men do when illness rearranges their proportions, and his hands on the blanket were the hands of someone who had used them for the full length of a life. He had a face that was still handsome in its basic architecture: wide forehead, deep-set eyes, a jaw that had once been definitive and was now simply present. He was looking at the door when she came in. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You have his eyes." She stopped just inside the door. "Sit down, please," he said. "There's a chair. I had them bring it closer." She sat. She kept her coat on because she was not certain how long she would stay. He said, "I knew your father." The radiator in the corner of the room ticked once. "Kofi Owusu," he said. "We worked together at International Harvester for 8 years. From 1973 to 1981. I was a floor supervisor, and he was the best mechanical fitter in the plant, and he was the only man I ever met who could fix anything I put in front of him and then tell me precisely what had caused it to break in the first place." He paused for breath. He used to say a machine doesn't lie. It breaks where it was stressed. You just have to know where to look. Abina's hands were folded in her lap. She did not move them. In 1979, Chief Danjuma said, "I was in trouble. Financial trouble. The kind that arrives faster than it departs. I had made an investment with a man I should not have trusted, and I had borrowed money to do it, and when the investment failed, I was left with a debt of $11,000 and no means of addressing it before the end of the month. I had a wife. I had 2 young children. I had a mortgage on a house in Waukegan that I was 6 weeks from losing." He looked at his hands. "I told no one. I was too proud to tell anyone. Your father found out because your father paid attention to the people around him the way most people only pay attention to their own problems. He noticed I was not eating lunch. He noticed I had stopped buying coffee from the cart. He waited until a Friday, the end of shift, and he came to my station and he said, 'Danjuma, come with me.' He stopped. He gathered breath. He took me to the parking lot. He gave me an envelope. Inside was $11,000 in cash. He said, 'My wife and I decided this morning. You will pay us back when you can. There is no interest, and there is no deadline.'" Chief Danjuma's eyes did not leave Abena's face. I told him I could not accept it. He said, "You already have. I put it in your coat pocket when you were not looking. The envelope is just so you would know what it was." The afternoon light through the window of room 814 had gone the color of old gold. Somewhere down the corridor a cart moved. The room held the story the way a room holds heat, slowly, completely, reluctant to release it. "I paid him back," Chief Danjuma said, "in 1983 when I had it. I tried to add interest, and he refused. He said, 'Danjuma, interest is for banks. We are not a bank.'" He looked at her. "I left the plant in 1981. I built a business in logistics, freight, Warehousing, eventually real estate. I was fortunate. I was also honest, which in business is not always the same as fortunate, but in my experience tends to produce the same eventual result. He shifted slightly in the bed. I tried to find your father in 2003 to tell him what his money had become. I was told he had passed away in February of that year. I was given this address. He meant South Boulevard, she understood. He meant the city. He meant the general direction of her life. I hired someone to find you in 2004. You were in Gary, Indiana. I was going to reach out, and then I told myself I would do it properly, with time, when I could do it correctly. And then the way time passes, he did not finish the sentence. He reached to the table beside the bed and picked up a folded document with both hands, slowly, the way a man picks up something he has been thinking about for a long time. He held it out toward her. I have spoken with my attorneys, he said. My children are provided for. They are more than provided for. What I am giving you is not from their portion. It is from mine, from what I set aside for this specific purpose 20 years ago and did not stop adding to. He held the document, steady. It is a fund established in your name. The principal amount is $1.1 million. It is yours to manage as you choose. There is a letter from my attorney that explains the structure. There are no conditions, no restrictions, no obligations to my family or to my estate. It is yours, because it was always yours. Because your father put it in my coat pocket in a parking lot in 1979 and told me there was no interest and no deadline, and the deadline came anyway, and I was not ready, and I am sorry that I was not ready sooner. Abina looked at the document. She did not take it immediately. She said, "Why didn't you just send this? Why did you want me to come?" He said, "Because I wanted to see his eyes." She took the document with both hands. She sat with it for a moment. Then she said, "He never told us about the money. About you." "No," Chief Danjuma said. "He wouldn't have. He didn't keep records of things like that. No, he kept records of machines, people he simply trusted." She looked at the document in her hands. She looked at the window, at the old gold light. She looked at the man in the bed who was 81 years old and running an account that had been open for 44 years and had come, finally, with everything accumulated, to the point of settlement. He would have said this was too much, she said. Yes, Chief Danjuma said. He would have said that. And then he would have found a way to turn it into something useful, because that was what he did with everything. He paused. "I'm trusting you to do the same." The document was processed the following Monday at the offices of Chidinma and Associates on Michigan Avenue. Abina sat across from the attorney with her navy coat folded on the chair beside her and answered questions in the precise, unhurried way she answered everything, and signed where she was asked to sign, and left at 11:17 a.m. with a folder of papers, and walked out onto Michigan Avenue into the November air. She stood on the sidewalk for a while. People moved around her the way water moves around something that is standing still. She did not call anyone. She did not have many people to call. She walked to a diner on Erie Street and ordered coffee and eggs and toast and ate at a corner table and looked out the window at the street and thought about her father in a parking lot in 1979. Putting an envelope in a man's coat pocket, and about what it means to give something without a deadline, without interest, without the infrastructure of debt, to give it simply because the person needed it, and you had it. And those two facts, placed next to each other, were sufficient instruction. She left the diner at 12:41 p.m. and went back to work. She had an afternoon shift starting at 1. Chief Al Danjuma died on a Thursday, 3 weeks after Abina's visit, at 4:19 in the morning. in room 814 at Northwestern Memorial, with his daughter Nia beside him. Pauline Adeyemi sent Abina a message that afternoon. Abina read it on her break, sitting in the break room of the Palms Budget Inn with a motivational poster on the wall she had never read in 9 years. She read the message twice. She set her phone down. She picked up her tea. She thought about a machine that does not lie, about how it breaks where it was stressed, and you have to know where to look, about the way her father had looked at broken things, not with frustration, but with attention, with the settled confidence of someone who understood that a thing that is broken is simply a thing that is waiting to be understood. What Abina did with the money over the following 2 years belongs to a longer story, but some of it can be said here. She established a small educational fund for children in the Inglewood and Bronzeville neighborhoods. Not a large institution, not a building with a name on it, but a structured account administered through a credit union on 63rd Street that paid school fees and bought uniforms and covered the cost of examination registration for 41 students in the first year. She continued working at the Palms Budget Inn for 14 more months until the fund was properly established and running, because she did not think of the money as something that replaced her life, but as something that extended it. She moved to a better apartment eventually, on South Michigan Avenue, with a window that faced a park. But she kept the carved wooden bird from her father's windowsill on this new windowsill, because some things travel with you not because they are valuable, but because they are true. She did not put her name on the fund. She called it the Kofi Owusu Memorial Bursary, after her father, because he had put $11,000 in a man's coat pocket in a parking lot in 1979 and said there was no interest and no deadline. And she understood that naming a thing correctly is the most permanent way to keep it. There are things that are given in this world, without record, without receipt, without the architecture of expectation. They are given in parking lots and break rooms and at kitchen tables at 6 a.m. They are given by people who have calculated, quietly and without announcement, that someone else needs this more than I need the comfort of keeping it. These gifts do not disappear when the person who gave them disappears. They do not expire. They accumulate, quietly, in the ledger that the world keeps separately from the one we think we are managing, and they come back, not always, not on a schedule, not with interest in any conventional sense, but they come back, in a cream-colored envelope. In room 814, in a folder of papers on Michigan Avenue on a November morning, in a fund that carries a man's name 44 years after he stood in a parking lot in the dark and decided that decency did not require an audience. Your father, your mother, the person who put something in your hand when you were not looking and asked nothing in return, they are in the ledger, not the ledger you can see. The other one, the one that settles in its own time, in its own way, always correctly, always completely. Here is the question I want to leave with you today. If someone gave you everything they had when you needed it most and asked nothing back, and then years passed, and you found yourself with the means to honor that, what would you do? Not what would you give. What would you name it? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to read every one. Subscribe for more stories about the debts that are paid in full long after the people who are owed them are gone, and the people who make sure they are paid. This channel is for the ones who understand that a thing given without a deadline is the most permanent thing there is. I'll see you in the next one.